All right. Hello, everybody. I hope you all are doing well. For those of you that don't know, this is DFS Army's tournament strategy show where we look back at last night, which was a night, and then we look at today and we game plan, talk through guys we like, guys I'm not as excited about, and then of course on the pre-lock show, which is at 5:30 p.m. for the VIP members only, we'll talk through what we're actually doing on the slate right before lock. We'll talk through leverage plays, core plays. I'll show what I'm actually doing in the DS, that kind of thing. If you want a 10% discount to be a VIP member, like I said, click the link in the description. Promo code BOB for a 10% discount. Yeah, y'all, I'll be honest. Last night was a toughie. It's weird because I feel like we hit on a lot, but then we also missed on a lot. So this was the 100K winning lineup last night. Cole Anthony, we had a lot of him. That wasn't a surprise. D'Anthony Melton made a lot more sense once the Joel Embiid news came out, which came out of nowhere, by the way. But that happens. That's NBA DFS for you. So that made sense. He was seeing some ownership. Franz Wagner, I had a 20% min on last night. I knew we were probably going to need some exposure to him. Unfortunately, I also had a lot of exposure to Paolo, and that did not go as well. So Franz, that was good. The other side of that, Paolo, not as great. Kawhi Leonard, we were over the field on, had a min on him. Jaren Jackson Jr., I wasn't a fan of the Memphis chalk yesterday in general, as you guys know. By the time we got to the pre-lock show, though, I was more interested in Jaren Jackson Jr. I was trying my best to get over the field on him, but ultimately it was a little hard to force just because of the way lineups were looking. But we had exposure to JJJ. Jalen Green was a core play. He was obvious. I wish I would have just went even heavier on him, to be honest. Stanley, he was just the value play that made it work. He did do pretty well, though, yesterday, but that was mostly due to blowout run. And then Derrick Rose did pretty well as well. And again, I was pretty comfortable. I think we were still over the field for Derrick Rose. I was okay with Brody, Biyombo, the cheap guys. Bane was the guy I didn't want. So, like I said, last night, not the best night for me. I had AD a lot in a lot of lineups. He was a leverage play. We had MPJ as a leverage play last night. That went well, but I had too much Paolo, too much Ivy. Yeah, just one of those things. Anyway, let's see. What are you guys saying? Michael Ortiz, good to see you, man. Hope you're having a good morning. Cameron said, we appreciate. Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Sometimes you go through some highs and lows where sometimes you feel like no one really cares what you do, but I appreciate you guys sticking around with me. Also, it's a Thursday. It's a football day. So appreciate that even more. Tanner, I hope you're doing well, man. Glad I didn't miss the stream today. I'm glad you didn't either. Dixon's always good having you in here. All right, guys, let's see. Yeah, that freaking sucked. Russ playing 19 minutes. Thankfully, I wasn't on Russ too much, but it's getting a little extreme. No more Russ cooking, man. And I didn't even mention Maxey. I had a little bit more Maxey, but I didn't go overboard because it was just hard for me to adjust my lineups to get him too much. But still, that was a wild performance from Maxey with Embiid out. I expected him to do much better. It's been weird, though. This is like the second time this has happened where Maxey hasn't had a ceiling performance game with Embiid out, I believe. And then the game right after he went off last time. We'll see if he does that this time. But he's not dead to me, but he is feeling a little weird right now. All right, let's jump into today's slate. I do feel like it's an interesting one. One where we have teams that we don't usually like to play guys from who are in very, very good spots. And just looking at these game totals, you see the Nets, a team we don't usually play a lot of, facing the Hornets, who are bad everywhere defensively. We see the Miami Heat, another team we don't target too often in DFS unless guys are out, facing the Pacers, a team we like to target a lot. We have the Spurs, a team that I feel like we play relatively often, but again, not a team you're usually excited to play guys from. In the highest total game going up against the Hawks. And then we also have the Bulls going up against the Bucks, who are now a team we like to pick on in a decent total game. So interesting spots across the board tonight. I have some guys I don't like as much. I have some guys I do like, and we'll get to that, of course, as we go through the show. Mo, I hope you're doing well, man. Yeah, bro. The blowouts have been wild this season. And we talked about it before. I always wonder, like, is this normal? Do we always have a lot of blowouts? It feels like more this season, but I'll be honest, Bane was starting to get hot, so I'm kind of glad that Memphis game blew out because we would. It already wasn't the best night, but it would have been a little bit more nerve wracking if Bane went off. But anyway, today's game was Portland Trailblazers against the Cavs game. Not super excited about it. Ayton has been in fantastic form this season. Two back-to-back 40-plus point performances, DK points. The matchup against the Cavs isn't my favorite. He's 7K. He's low owned. You'll see this is a pretty common trend for me today. I like a lot of the bigs in these games. As long as he stays low owned, I'm probably going to have him in 1 to 2 of my lines today. I'm only 20 maxing tonight, not 150 maxing. So I'm not going to have as much exposure as I usually would. I would probably typically, if I was 150 maxing, put a 5% min on Ayton and go from there. Grant has been just as good as Ayton has this season in some ways, but he's a little bit more expensive. And again, I don't love this matchup in the first place, so I don't really foresee myself getting to any of these guys outside of Ayton. And honestly, even if I don't get Ayton, this is the lowest total game on the slate with the widest spread. Not the end of the world. The Cavs are a bit more interesting. Again, they're facing the bad defense, but the total is still low and the spread is still wide. So these aren't guys you'll feel great about, even though the matchup is a +1 for them. Evan Mobley makes sense, but he's getting decent ownership. Not a spot I'm super excited about. Darius Garland, I do like a bit more. I just like how involved he is with the offense, and I like his price tag a bit more as well at 7,500 and slightly lower owned than Mobley, so that helps a little bit. Donovan Mitchell is just hard to get to. He's obviously viable, but he's hard to get to on this slate. He's also, again, this is the lowest total game with the widest spread, so hard to find a great case for Donovan Mitchell outside of, again, just a soft matchup. He'll have to be really efficient within the time that he's on the court because I don't see this game staying very close. Speaking of all the blowouts. Jay, good to see you, man. I agree. It's time to get on the money winning train. We had a good day on Tuesday. Wednesday was crappy. Thursday. Honestly, Tuesdays and Thursdays are historically my best DFS days, along with Saturdays. But I don't play as much on Saturday as I used to. But agreed, Wagwan Kaboon. I hope you're doing well. Let's get the money. All right, guys. Let's get to it. Let's get to it. Not touching Donovan Mitchell after he put up a 40 burger. Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't think this is a bad spot to not play Donovan Mitchell. I think you can completely fade this game, but I will try and get Garland and Ayton in my lineups just as kind of like your GPP flyer plays, but they won't be core plays or anything like that. This next game, we have the Hornets against the Nets. As you all know, LaMelo Ball is out. That dramatically changes how this team operates. Brandon Miller moved into the starting lineup, and of course, Terry Rozier came back. Perfect timing. Last game. I like Terry in this spot. Again, the game total's decent at 224. The spread is pretty wide, but Terry's still only 7,700. I'm going to keep playing Terry. I mentioned it last time. I think they're facing the Knicks. Today they're facing the Nets. Teams I don't love picking on, but I love the price tag of Terry. And I am trying to get in a little early before they have that golden matchup where everyone's going to be playing him. Because Terry's a good player. He looked good in the last 2 games he's been playing. So I have no concerns around him at all at this point, and they are giving him a ton of minutes. 7,700 feels like a steal. Other guys, Miller and Bridges are the only other 2 guys I would look at. But again, I don't love this matchup against the Nets, so I'm really only looking at Terry here. All right. For the Nets, they get the soft matchup against this Hornets team. The problem is Cam Thomas playing. He said he'll play. He's listed as probable for now. Cam Thomas eats up so much of the usage for this team that it's really hard to look at any of the other guys here. There hasn't been any reports about Cam Thomas being limited or not playing a ton of minutes or anything like that. So assuming he plays, I think he's an interesting GPP target. He's on my radar. He has a very low projected ownership percentage for now, but it feels a little weird. I think people might be nervous about him not playing a lot of minutes tonight or just something like that. But I think Cam Thomas could be viable. Let me just make sure I'm not making stuff up. 7,100. He's been out for a long time. But we know this guy has 40, 50-point upside. Again, probably not the most likely that he plays a ton of minutes his first game back, but if we don't get any news talking about him being limited, I'm interested in potentially taking a shot here against a really bad Hornets team. Of course, next up is Nick Claxton as another guy who makes a lot of sense. I feel like last year and the year before that, we've been talking about playing bigs against the Hornets for so long, and these guys were always low owned, and we were able to make a ton of money. Now it feels like everyone has caught on, and the ownership is now a bit higher on these guys. Nick Claxton at 6,300 against the Hornets. You all know I love playing bigs against the Hornets, but now because the ownership's getting higher on these guys in these spots, I have to be a little bit more thoughtful around who I want to prioritize on the slate. And there's a lot of bigs who are in really good spots. For now, I'm leaning a little bit closer towards not playing Claxton tonight. But of course, I'm still debating the issue here. Cameron Johnson is the last guy I have some interest in as well for the Nets. Again, super soft matchup, but my biggest concern with Johnson is that I think he'll just be a ghost out there if Cam Thomas comes out firing tonight. So a little nervous about that. Dinwiddie, less exciting with Cam Thomas back. Bridges, exact same thing, less exciting with Cam Thomas back, but viable. I think Bridges is a bit more viable than Dinwiddie is on the slate. Oh, man. Cade Cunningham was fine last night, but a bit of a disappointment, at least for me. The Pistons are going up against the Knicks. Everyone knows I don't like to pick on the Knicks. They're a good defensive team. Everyone is priced pretty appropriately here. I don't foresee myself playing a lot of the Pistons tonight. Cade is interesting, but 8,800 feels exactly where he should be priced. Anyone else we should look at here? Yeah, no one's standing out. All right. Knicks against the Pistons. Mitchell Robinson has been fantastic this season. He's still only 5,400. There's other cheap centers on this slate in really good spots as well, but Mitchell Robinson's one the sim model likes a lot as well. And so for me, I don't like to fight with the sim model as much when it really likes a guy like it likes Mitchell Robinson tonight. So I'll be at least around field weight exposure to Mitchell Robinson as long as the sim continues to like him just as much as some of the other guys on the slate. And for those of you who are curious, let's see. The sim model has a 10.8% chance of Mitchell Robinson hitting 8x tonight, and that's very, very high. We don't see that very often. So I'm okay with the ownership, and I love the price tag, so I'll at least be eating that. All right. For the Pacers, they're facing the Heat. The Heat are a team I don't like to pick on very often. It's one of those things where I understand a case for Halliburton, especially if this game stays close, and the spread is pretty close currently. But don't love the matchup, don't love the price tag. I like the ownership on these guys. They're extremely low, but I would need some convincing. I'm not overly excited about anyone on the Pacers right now. It is the second highest game total on the slate, so it has that going for them. And I think, too, when you just look at the price tags for these guys, we're not getting value at all from them. And a lot of these guys are streaky, and so I feel like we're paying – premium is probably the wrong word, but I feel like we're paying a premium for pretty much everyone on this team right now. So you can take your shots, but I'm not feeling it. The Heat are interesting tonight, mostly because they have so many people out and questionable. Jimmy Butler is listed as questionable right now. That's huge for this slate and for what I plan on doing. We talked about it. We don't usually like to target the Heat too often unless they have people out. If Butler's out, these guys are in a fantastic matchup against the Pacers. I'm willing to play almost any and all of them. We also have Haywood Highsmith listed as questionable. That would really open things up as well. Those are two potential starters who could be missing this game. I am hoping they decide to sit this one out because I would love to play, like I said, pretty much every single Heat starter. I'm not into Bam too much right now. If Jimmy Butler plays, I understand why people like him in this spot. We do like to pick on the Pacers with bigs, but if Jimmy plays, I think there's better center plays on the slate. If Jimmy's out, though, I love Bam tonight. Duncan Robinson is always a bit more hit or miss for me, but again, if Jimmy Butler and Highsmith are out, I'm willing to play Robinson. Jaime, I think he's totally viable, probably one of my favorite plays on the slate if Butler ends up being ruled out alongside Highsmith. Lowry, Butler needs to be out. Richardson, same thing. If we get the injury news here, would love the spot. If we don't get the injury news and Butler and Highsmith play, I think Highsmith is probably the most viable for me just because he's super cheap at 4,300, but he hasn't been seeing the minutes, and so I would still be nervous about that. But I always say it, high total games, I'm a little bit more open to playing some of these guys I don't love. Yeah, Mo, exactly. Mitchell Robinson was popping in the sim pretty hard. Lopez, how do you guys build for single entry other than hand building? I've never used the domination station for single entry. I know some people do with success. I would recommend talking to Madness or Mutt, two other DFS Army coaches here, or uppers too. I know Madness and Mutt, though, in particular, single entry. They do single entry a good bit. And then, of course, Brandon can help you out a little bit later on the pre-lock show. But I'm more of an MME kind of guy, unfortunately. I used to hand build a lot, but not as much anymore. Jackson at 4K is okay if in. Yeah, Isaiah Jackson for the Pacers. We didn't talk about that. McConnell and Jackson are both listed as questionable. I personally wouldn't try to get to Jackson today. Just not. I don't like picking on the Heat very much. Of course, that could change as the slate continues, and if I see things, or as the day progresses, as we get closer to lock, some things could change. But I don't foresee myself getting a lot of Jackson here. Just a tough matchup. And he's also just on the Pacers, who they play around with rotations a lot, even when it comes to their bigs. Isaiah Jackson, he sees 19 minutes. He is projecting decently. Looks like he'll see some ownership, but I don't love it, to be honest with you. Ideally, I'm not seeing him show up in my lines, but if he does, we'll have to handle that then. For the Hawks, this is the highest total game on the slate, 247, 7-point spread. The Hawks are pretty healthy at this point. The Spurs are a god-awful defense. They're a team we know we can pick on. So I'm okay playing a lot of these Hawks tonight. But with that being said, they're seeing ownership, and Trae Young in particular, 9,700 isn't my favorite play. I'm not going to go out of the way to fade him or anything like that, but if when I start to run my lines, I'm not seeing a ton of Trae Young, I wouldn't be upset about it. Ideally, I'll be around field weight, which is around 15 to 20%, but we'll see. For the rest of these guys, Bogdanovic, he can be in your mix. He's looking like he's going to be pretty chalky. DeJounte Murray is the guy that I like the most from this team. He's also the lowest owned. We've seen DeJounte have decent upside in spots like this, especially against bad defenses. So he's the guy I will be prioritizing. Possibly a leverage play, which again would still only be 12 to 15%, but I like him a good bit here. Bogdanovic, decent play, like I said, good total, good matchup, all that stuff. Hunter, 5,800 for his production level. Feels a little expensive, but not the craziest thing I've seen. Let me look at the sim, see what it thinks about Hunter. Or Hunt. Yeah, Hunter. 5,800. Yeah, it's not a fan. Yeah, so I doubt I'll get there. Clint Capella, bigs against the Spurs. Spurs are a bad defense. Clint Capella's been decent this season. He's fine. Sadiq Bey, he's been playing more consistent minutes recently, so it's totally fine to get to him. And then Okongwu, his price tag is coming up a little bit, but at 5K, he's still viable for the amount he's been playing in a really soft matchup. So long story short, I like the Hawks tonight. The only guy I feel strongly about, and I'm going to try to force exposure to, is DeJounte Murray. And then ideally, the domination station will give me a nice mix of the rest of the guys. All right, for the Spurs, we have more injury news we have to keep a close eye out for. For the Spurs, Victor Wembanyama is listed as questionable. That's huge for this team because he dominates the team through usage. Again, I honestly didn't love the ownership I was seeing on Victor. I didn't love his price tag, but I always say it. Highest total game on the slate. The spread isn't outrageous. It makes sense to play Victor here against a soft defense like the Hawks have. Not a guy I foresee being a core play, assuming he plays, but I would want some exposure. I would be more willing to prioritize Zach Collins here. I do like playing bigs against the Hawks. He's 10% owned, which is still a little high, but not crazy. And I love the matchup. Also, the sim model likes Zach Collins as well. So that is how I make a lot of my decisions and is leaning towards him. I'm fine with him on this slate. Vassell, Johnson, Sohan, Trey Jones, these are guys that I want exposure to primarily if Victor ends up being ruled out. And of course, Zach Collins becomes he would be a core play if Victor ended up being ruled out. So quite a few interesting options depending on what the injury news ends up being on if Victor plays or not. But long story short, highest total game on the slate. When I get exposure to these guys tonight, I'm not going to try to limit it. I want these guys to show up a good bit. Yeah, Bogdanovich. All these guys in this game look solid. I do not disagree. Revenge game for Bogdanovich. I forgot about that. God, I've been slacking on the narratives here recently. That does impact things a little bit. It kind of gives him a little boost. You should get a good bit of Bogdanovich naturally, but I do like a good revenge narrative. I hope Wemby plays. Yeah, I honestly, I'm fine either way. If he plays, it makes the game more interesting. Hopefully that helps keep the game close. If he doesn't play, I think there's some decent options here. I would like Trey Jones a lot. I would assume he would move into the starting lineup. I would assume he moves into the starting lineup. But yeah, I'm okay either way as long as we get the news before lock. Ideally, if we can get it before lock, we can make the right decisions for it. If we get it post lock, a little bit tougher. Next up, we have the Lakers against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Lakers, they played last night. Anthony Davis crushed. D'Angelo Russell went off. I'm surprised he wasn't in the Nuts lineup. D'Lo was a call that Brandon did mention yesterday on the pre-lock show, so wasn't a complete surprise for everyone. But Anthony Davis, I like him once again tonight. Rinse, wash, repeat. He's going to be low owned. He is coming off of a back-to-back, so I do think there's an argument to not play AD here, but I'll be playing him. Some model likes him. I like him. Low ownership. It's going to happen. LeBron, not overly excited about. This isn't a nationally televised game. LeBron has been in good form this season, but not my favorite spot for him. If I get a little bit, it's fine, but not trying to prioritize him. The only guy I'm trying to force in, if I don't get him naturally, is Anthony Davis tonight. And I'll let the DS do the rest. For the Thunder, we like playing bigs against the Lakers. Chet's only 7,900. Looks like he's not going to be too chalky either. So I'll be over the field on this as long as his ownership stays low. If he gets more popular as the slate continues, you can expect me to get a little bit less excited about Chet tonight. But I do like exactly where he is now. I do miss him being power forward eligible, but I get it. It's fine. SGA is fine. 10,500, decent matchup against the Lakers. I think it was Zolo yesterday who called athletic guards against the Lakers have been pretty solid so far this season. The ownership is what drives me towards not forcing it. If I get him naturally when I start to run my lines, I'm fine with that. But there's other guys I'm paying up for, like AD, like Steph, and the Clippers guys who aren't super expensive. If the DS can fit those guys in alongside SGA, I'm fine with it, but I'm not trying to prioritize SGA tonight. Good spot, though. Good spot. Just not going to try to force him in. Can only force so many guys. Dort, Mo. Let's see. Let me look a little bit closer at him. Dort, 4,500. Yeah, not awful. Some of these last few games have been a little tough for my guy Dort, though. He had 8 DK points against the Timberwolves, good defense. 7.5 points against Philadelphia, good defense. he has not. I remember talking about him, was it last week, I think? And we were talking about how Lou Dort's been involved a bit more from an offensive standpoint. He's been looking pretty solid, but my guy's looking rough here lately. I'm not a big fan of him tonight in particular. I think there's better options, to be honest with you, Mo. But if he was like your last lineup filler play, I don't think it's crazy. Let's look at the sim model and just make sure I'm not missing anything here. Lou Dort. Sim model likes him a good bit, actually. But it does prefer Naz Reid significantly so. When you get to like the cheap options, that's when I don't discredit the sim model, but it's easier for cheap guys to get 6, 7, 8x value. So it just takes a little bit less. So I care a bit more about what the sim model says on the more expensive guys who have a hard time getting the 8x value. And the cheap guys who pop, I'm more interested in them being in my mix. I'm not going to X them out if they show up naturally in the domination station. So if we get a little bit of Lou Dort around 5-10%, I wouldn't X him out. But I care a little bit less about what the sim says on the cheapies. It does have a pretty good track record, though. So don't ignore it. Hopefully we're looking back at this and Lou Dort crushes. And I was like, Mo, man, you got it. You got it right. Next up, we have the Bucks against the Bulls. The Bucks are tough. Giannis is expensive, 11,200. Damian Lillard's playing. Everyone's healthy. These guys aren't going to stand out for me. You can play Giannis. He's viable. He's a stud. He can break any slate. Similar story of Damian Lillard. But for me, when they're both healthy in a matchup that's not super ideal, in a game total that's fine at 229, spread at 8.5, it's fine, but it's not anything special. I'm just not going to force exposure to these guys in these spots, especially Damian Lillard, who's seeing decent ownership at 12.28. 9,100 isn't too expensive for a guy like Dame, but the ownership takes me out of consideration. Brook Lopez is another big I like. The sim model likes him a good bit. His ownership is worrying. So if I start to run my lines and I see, and if I'm not seeing him showing up naturally, I'm not going to, I need to look at my center position by the time I get to the pre-lock show and really just kind of rank out where I want these guys to be. This is easier to do when you 20 max. When I 150 max, I care a lot less about this. But 20 maxing, I only have limited amount of space for these centers. And so I'm really just going to have to rank them out where I want them to be. But Lopez is one of the bigs I like on this slate. And the only guy I'm really trying to get exposure to from the Bucks tonight. The Bulls, man, part of why I like this slate is because I'm hoping some of these Bulls don't play. So currently we have Zach LaVine listed as questionable, DeMar DeRozan listed as questionable, Alex Caruso is listed as questionable. All guys who play pretty significant minutes for this team. I think it's pretty clear if DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine are out, Kobe White sees the highest boost in usage. It would be a really good spot for him. We also like playing guards against the Bucks in general, so he would be a bit more viable. If everyone plays, I'll be okay with taking some shots on Zach LaVine. Everyone pretty much knows we like playing the scoring guards against the Bucks, but he's already seeing some decent ownership. So again, not a guy I would try to force, but if it happens naturally, it's fine. DeMar, I'm not super excited about him. It's just a bit of a weird one. Darius, good question. Who is my favorite play? It's such a weird slate so far because we're waiting on some pretty important news from the Heat, the Spurs, the Bulls. So I would expect later my answer will be pretty different. But for now, I would say it's the Timberwolves, guys. They're the best plays on the slate by far. For the Jazz, facing the Timberwolves, one of the best teams, defenses in the league. None of these guys are going to stand out. Jordan Clarkson's priced decently at 7,600. He would just have to be extremely efficient to get there. So not overly excited about him or any of the Jazz. But if they show up some, that's fine. Now, part of why we haven't had a lot of teams we're trying to play, or we haven't really been too excited about any of the previous games, is because of the Timberwolves. This is where I expect to get most of my ownership today from. And there's a few reasons for it. One, we saw what the Grizzlies did to the Jazz last night. The Jazz are coming off of a back-to-back. I don't expect them to be better tonight. And then outside of just the fantastic matchup, we also have injury news that goes along with that. Anthony Edwards is doubtful. He wasn't at shoot-around today. It looks like he's not going to play. I think you guys know. If you're watching this, you follow basketball. Anthony Edwards is basically the Timberwolves. He does so much for this team. From a usage rate standpoint, when he's out, the guy who sees the highest increase in usage is Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns is not a guy you usually like to trust, and his shot has not been there this season, but he's facing the Jazz. We saw Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. and Derrick Rose and Rhodey do well against this team. I expect Karl Anthony Towns to have a nice bounce back game today and look really good doing it. So he's close to a core play for me today. He will probably be a core play for me today. And he's only 8,800, which just makes a lot work. Rudy Gobert also, he sees the second highest increase in usage. His is to a much lesser degree. Cat sees 11.2% increase in usage. Rudy Gobert only sees a 4.5% increase in usage, which is pretty substantial. I said that way too casually. That's a really good mark for him. He is priced up a bit here in this really nice matchup. He's now 7,400 when we were getting him in the 6K range, but I do not care. I want Rudy Gobert exposure. I want Karl Anthony Towns exposure. These are two guys I feel good about on this slate. Mike Conley, I'm fine having him in the mix for once. He is typically a low usage guy, but with Ant out, fine having him. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 4,900. One of those guys you're going to get a lot of on this slate. I feel comfortable with him and having a lot of him being over the field. Naz Reid, I feel comfortable with, even more so with Ant out. Again, awesome matchup against the Jazz here, only 4,500. And yeah, Kyle Anderson is the guy I don't trust here. And I don't understand why everyone's playing him and not Troy Brown Jr. And I feel like I'm missing something. When Anthony Edwards got hurt in the third quarter, at the end of the third quarter, Troy Brown played the rest of the fourth quarter. It was Troy Brown who did it. And Troy Brown is the one who should be moving into the starting lineup today as well. So I'm assuming this ownership will adjust maybe, or maybe I'm just really missing something. But I'm looking to prioritize Troy Brown Jr. as one of my plays for the slate. Like I said, I love Cat and Rudy Gobert. The value pieces here with Nah and Naz Reid and Kyle Anderson, I would rank in exactly that order. And I'll probably end up under the field on Kyle Anderson, to be honest. But you are exactly right. I'm a loser until I win the millie. If Anderson starts, he is a really good play on this slate. So I don't disagree with it. Slow-mo is the better point per minute guy and Reid with him. That's fair. Yo, I'm late, but what's good? Good to see you, Chris. Hope you're doing well. Anderson for the blowout. Anderson's fine. Anderson is a good play. What I don't like is his high ownership. That 68.52 number is just extremely high to me. He isn't super cheap. And if he starts, he deserves that. But I'm expecting Troy Brown Jr. to start, and so I'm hoping I'm over the field on him instead of Kyle Anderson. Again, I'll still have Kyle Anderson exposure, but I'll probably be under the field on him if he doesn't start. So one of those situations we have to keep a close eye on. Let's see. Shake, not as interested in. Anyway, I'm playing pretty much all the Timberwolves here. And like I said, just to go over it one more time, prioritizing Cat, Gobert, and Troy Brown Jr., assuming he starts. For the Clippers. Loser for sure. That just feels wrong, man. That just feels wrong. Oh, but I feel you. It is a little bit easier. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like I'll be honest with you all. I could have some bias here against Slow-mo. I feel like whenever he's chalky and he's not starting, he busts so hard. And that could just be a small sample size that I'm remembering as a core memory, but I just can't do it. But if he starts, I'm down for it. Coach Chris said I'm gonna have to fade Kyle. I have some exposure, but yeah, this sounds like Jaden Ivey again. Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't very high on Jaden Ivey yesterday either until like we got super close to lock, and that's when I made him a core play. So I like trusting my gut here on these kind of spots. But like I said, I'll play Kyle if he starts, but if he doesn't, not a fan. Last game on the slate, hammer game, decent total, nice spread, no ownership, which we saw yesterday too. Paul George has been struggling a little bit over the last 2 to 3 games. Yeah, good. Yeah, I knew it wasn't my first time not liking him. It's been one of those things. It's just slow-mo. I remember he had a great run during COVID. That was like a really good time. But since then, it's been a bit more hit or miss. But anyway, moving on. Clippers against Golden State. I really like the trio. Once again, all these guys are 8K. I've been playing them. I've been over the field on all these guys. One of these guys have been crushing it pretty much every slate, if not 2 out of the 3. So James Harden, I want to be over the field on. He's now 8K, makes it a little bit harder, but this is feeling like a nice mid-range slate for me where I'm not paying up too much on like the 10, 11K guys. I'm really staying in this 8K range, especially when we look at the Timberwolves side of the ball, or when we look at the Timberwolves, and then when we look at this game, I'm liking mid-range builds right now. So Paul George is someone that I want to be over the field on. That won't be hard. 10% would do that. Kawhi was really good last night. I'm feeling probably around 15%, but if I start to like him a bit more, I'm willing to go to 20. And then James Harden, we talk about it. He was really good as well yesterday, and so I'm totally fine going back to him, probably around 10 to 15%. So pretty easy leverage there since no one's really playing them. Zubac is the next option. You can play bigs against the Warriors, but again, I like a lot of bigs on this slate, so it's hard to prioritize him here. I don't like the other Clippers. Again, I'm getting most of my value from the Timberwolves, so I'm not really worried about some of the other peripheral pieces for most of these teams. And then last but not least, you have to mention Curry. He's only 9,800. Decent total on the game, nice spread. He's just always in my mix, someone that I like to have exposure to. Not a guy who's going to be a core play or someone I'll have 30% of, but I think 5 to 10 is definitely appropriate here. So I'll be doing that. So yeah, y'all, that's this slate in a nutshell. It's a weird one. We're waiting on injury news per usual, and we can hope for the best. But I look forward to seeing everyone on the pre-lock show. B-Dubs will be here for the pre-lock show. We'll both be able to kind of talk through what we're doing on this slate. Then, like I mentioned, feel free to use the promo code BOB if you're interested in that. And then, of course, we have the Discord where Upper Slat is updating everyone on all the injury news that comes out, and he gives his thought process behind different pivots you can make as well. So that's also a great reason to become a member too. So anyway, appreciate you all and your time. I look forward to seeing you all later. Mo, talking about Clay? Oh, man, that's a B-Dub. B-Dub's called the Clay Thompson play last time around, and that went well for him. Honestly, I'm not super excited about Clay here at 6,400, but maybe Brandon will be able to talk me into it. Like I said, y'all, peace out. Have a good one.